Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I want to welcome everyone to our session today. Welcome back to those of you who attended last week, and welcome to any new attendees. Last week, we focused on taking care of yourself in the caregiver role by pushing pause. This week, we're going to build on that while we address ways to cope with uncertainty. I'm Lauren Kriegel, and I'll be your host and presenting with my colleague, Brittany Foles. Welcome to the second session of our CAR-T webinar, Caring for a Loved One Undergoing CAR-T Cell Therapy, hosted by the Cancer Support Community. Our CAR-T webinar series is designed to offer information and address the concerns and emotions of those caring for a loved one undergoing CAR-T cell therapy. Today, during the second session titled Living with Uncertainty, we will discuss ways to manage the near constant uncertainty of caring for someone going through CAR-T cell therapy. Next week, we will have a CAR-T advanced practice nurse joining us to discuss the caregiver's role in monitoring for side effects of CAR-T. That is a must-see webinar, so I look forward to seeing you all back next week. Brittany and I want this webinar to be as interactive as possible, so we'll be asking you to participate along the way. We have polls and exercises. I'm going to ask everyone to have a pen and paper handy again, and I'm going to ask you to go get something. We're going to need something special for this session. So before we start, if you could grab like a small piece of chocolate, a mint, a sucking candy, a very small piece of fruit like a grape or a strawberry, just something small, and keep it near you. You're going to need it later. So please feel free to go grab that while we go through our housekeeping and introductions. And just like last week, Brittany and I will be sharing the presenting. A few reminders before we start. If you need technical assistance during the webinar, please email outreach@cancersupportcommunity.org. To listen using your telephone, please dial in using the numbers you see under the audio settings. And of course, you can always listen through your computer or tablet. Today's session is being recorded and will be available on our website at cancersupportcommunity.org/CAR-T next week on Thursday, October 21st. If you're listening to us live on October 14th, 2021, and you would like to ask a question, please click on Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You will then be able to type your question into the box. You can submit a question at any time during the live event, but please know we've allowed for a dedicated time at the end of the presentation to answer your questions and have some discussion. At the end of this webinar, we have an evaluation survey that only takes a few minutes and can give us valuable input to improve future webinars. So we hope you'll take time to fill out the survey at the end of the program. Last week, we talked about Cancer Support Community and a little bit of the background. And I just want to take a moment to remind everybody of our mission, which is to ensure that all people impacted by cancer are empowered by knowledge, strengthened by action, and sustained by community. Brittany and I have no financial disclosures to report. And I'll go over quickly our outline for the session. Some of this information was covered last week, and so we're just going to do a quick review in those areas and then spend the bulk of our time today talking about uncertainty. So we'll start by going over change in cancer, a review of common challenges and worries, mental health and cancer, and then spending most of our time acknowledging the known and unknown, talking about what's next, some resources available to all of you, and then of course, time for question and answer. So uncertainty. Uncertainty is defined as not able to be relied on, not known or definite. And while we may not wish to acknowledge it, uncertainty is a natural and unavoidable part of life. Very little about our lives is constant or totally certain. Life can change very quickly and very unpredictably, as all of you know. And I find that as human beings, we just want to know. Tell me what to do, how to do it, when to do it, where to do it, and I'll do it. But not knowing what to do is a very unsettling feeling. And that's never more true than when dealing with CAR-T cell therapy. So much of the process is unknown. Most importantly, will this treatment work? When dealing with CAR-T cell therapy, the phrase failed frontline therapies comes up often. And I just want to take a moment to talk about this, because if you've gotten to the CAR T stage in the journey, then typically frontline therapies have failed. And I want to be very clear. The patient did not fail the therapy failed the patient. And it's also important to acknowledge how much you and your loved one have been through to get to the CAR T point. So I've always said that, if every time you walk down the same street, someone jumped out and hit you in the head with a stick, it wouldn't take long before you started ducking and anticipating the next hit, right? Every time you and your loved one have gone down the treatment path, something has jumped out and set you back. So it's only natural that with each treatment now you're ducking and anticipating the next hit. So after we do our review of background material, Brittany and I are going to go over some practical tips for dealing with that feeling of trying to anticipate the unknown. I'll turn it over to Brittany.
Thank you, Lauren. So I want to just spend a little bit of time today talking about change in cancer. This is a review from our Push the Pause webinar from last week. And we spoke about 3 areas in life that can be disrupted or impacted by CAR T and a cancer diagnosis. So the 3 areas that we will touch on for today as a review are the physical, emotional, and spiritual changes that a cancer diagnosis can bring about in your life. So the physical changes, they can vary from person to person. The extent of physical changes can vary as well. So some of you may not experience any physical changes, and some of you might experience many physical changes. But it's important to look out for some of these areas in ways that they might be impeding in your daily life, such as hair loss, skin changes, weight gain or loss, increased fatigue, challenges with mobility, challenges with strength. Right, so these are all different ways and just a few examples of how our physical bodies can be impacted by a cancer diagnosis of a loved one. So as Lauren discussed in our webinar last week, anxiety and depression are 2 of the most common mental health concerns among caregivers, especially those who have a loved one undergoing CAR T. So here I want to just highlight some signs and symptoms to look out for as a caregiver, as we're going to be talking about much of the emotional components today in our Living with Uncertainty webinar. So if you're noticing that you're feeling nervous or anxious, worried more than usual, feeling overwhelmed, maybe you're feeling down or hopeless, depressed, loss of interest in activities, maybe you're feeling increase in vulnerability. These are all some of the signs to look out for. And of course, the spiritual impact. So you might be noticing yourself finding more questions about your purpose in life, or maybe you're finding yourself searching for meaning, maybe examining what really matters to you, or maybe you're thinking more about what you believe in. And all of these concerns are very, very valid and shared by many caregivers. So how do these changes cause challenges in our lives? We're going to focus on 3 different areas where that can happen. I want to start with the unwanted aloneness. So while CAR T-cell therapy is not a new therapy, it's not as common as some other therapies that are out there today. So further, with the rigorous course of CAR T, our loved one can become severely immunocompromised, which can lead to significant isolation. And on top of that, we're also dealing with a pandemic that can increase isolation to begin with. So adding all these extra layers here can really bring about some unwanted aloneness. Then we'll look at the loss of control. So, with our loved one going through CAR T-cell therapy, you might have been experiencing lengthy hospital stays, multiple doctor's appointments. Maybe you've uprooted your lives temporarily from home, lots of disruptions in your normal routine, follow-up scans, appointments post-treatment, right? All of these things can consume and take over your life and may feel like as if you've lost some control over what you once knew. And then we have the loss of hope. So if your loved one is at the CAR T stage of the road, you've already been through so much with prior therapies that can lead to many different worry thoughts and maybe make you feel like hope might be dwindling. So to review, we're just going to focus on some common challenges and worries that are shared by caregivers. So in 2020, our Cancer Support Community Research and Training Institute conducted a survey for caregivers to share their experience of caring for a loved one with cancer. This survey was called the Cancer Experience Registry. And I want to highlight just some of the areas of the survey results. In particular, nearly 1 out of 2 caregivers who answered the survey reported at least sometimes experiencing a sense of loss of control over their own life. So that's 50% of every person that responded to this survey share that they have felt some sense of loss of control. And that's significant. So that is really the basis of our webinar today. We'll be largely focusing on the loss of control and practical tools to help you cope through. So speaking of loss of control, here's a picture of a roller coaster. And if we're thinking about a roller coaster going through this experience, going through something like CAR T, well, that's being like, experiencing one of those super duper looper roller coasters, right? There's lots of ups and downs. It can be unpredictable about what to expect next. We know it's going to be a challenging ride, but we don't know just what it will feel like until we experience it for ourselves. And I just want to focus on some other areas of concern that have been shared by caregivers. Maybe you might have unexpectedly, with little preparation, become the primary caregiver for your loved one. Maybe it's been difficult because you've been doing this independently. And I know with lots of COVID restrictions over the past year or two, this has been even more so because there's been limitations on who can be there and available as a support person. You might have a fear of losing someone you love, your loved one. You might be balancing your caregiver duties on top of your normal routine duties and daily activities. And you can also be experiencing feelings of inadequacy. So I'd like to spend a few minutes doing a self-reflection here. This will be an opportunity for you to take some time for yourself here in this webinar to think about a time when you experienced a sense of uncertainty in a situation. This could be any situation that you've experienced before. It doesn't necessarily need to be with your loved one's treatment. But just take a little bit of time for yourself to think about this experience. How did you cope with these feelings of uncertainty in this past situation? And what did you find most helpful to get through it? Feel free to write down anything that's important to remember or remind yourself about this time, and anything that sticks out to you about how you were able to cope through. And I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. Okay. So this made me think about a quote that Lauren shared last week in our webinar about pushing the pause button. And she shared a quote that said, "You have survived 100% of your worst days that you've already been through. You're doing great." And this is what I would love for you to take away today from our webinar. It's important to remind ourselves of how we've gotten through difficult moments and feelings of uncertainty before to be able to help us through an experience like CAR T-cell therapy. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren.
Thanks, Brittany. I'm just going to do a very quick review of the mental health impact on cancer. We talked in detail last week about the 3 areas that can show up. We can experience distress, anxiety, and depression. You know, for distress, it's important to note that every single caregiver at every stage of cancer, regardless of the type of treatment, deals with issues that cause some level of distress, including feelings of vulnerability, sadness, and fear. And I always just like to take a moment to note, you know, I think sometimes we forget that having these kinds of feelings is normal when going through something distressing like cancer and CAR T-cell therapy. Anxiety and fear are also common reactions to a stressful event like cancer. And as we discussed last week, cancer patients and caregivers experience anxiety at rates above the general population. And that's also true for depression. And it's important to be on the lookout because while many emotions come and go and fade over time, some develop into depression. But caring for someone with cancer does not mean that you should expect or accept feeling sad or depressed all the time. So, as always, we always want to say if you're experiencing worry or sadness most of the day for most days of the week, or your worry or sadness is getting in the way of you doing the things you need to do, either for yourself or for your loved one, then we encourage you to reach out, contact a healthcare provider for a referral to a trained psychologist or licensed mental health provider.
So the rest of our webinar for today will be focused on the knowns and unknowns. And this will be the bulk of our topic about practical tools to help cope through those feelings of uncertainty. So as your loved one is going through or maybe has already been through CAR T-cell therapy, the fear of the unknown can start to take over thoughts. And maybe you had to uproot your life to get to the treatment center or be near the treatment center for an extended period of time. Maybe you had to take an extended period of time off from your job. Maybe finances are starting to become a concern. Or maybe you're starting to think, what if this treatment doesn't actually work for my loved one? Then what? Maybe some other areas of uncertainty that you're experiencing are worrying about the future and what lies ahead. You might have had to put some major plans on hold. There could be a fear that treatment will stop working, fear that the cancer will come back, or maybe there's fear that treatment will cause severe side effects for your loved one. And next week, nurse practitioner Alyssa Gable will be talking about side effects of CAR T-cell therapy and your role in monitoring and supporting a loved one experiencing treatment-related side effects. So please stay tuned for that. We are very excited for that webinar next week. The what ifs. So there are many what ifs when it comes to living with or supporting a loved one going through CAR T. Acknowledging these unknowns can lead you to feel anxious, angry, sad, afraid, distressed, right? We can go on and on with these feelings. But I want to highlight 2 spirals that we can have with the what ifs. We can find ourselves in this negative what if spiral, thinking about things like, what if CAR T doesn't work for my loved one? What if they have such severe side effects that they can't continue? What if the scans don't show positive results, right? The what if, we can just keep going. But then there's this other side of what if. There's this what if spiral that we can go down where we ask questions like, well, what if the therapy does work for my loved one? What if they're in remission after they finish treatment, right? So there's this other level of spiraling of what ifs. What's interesting to acknowledge is that our minds tend to focus on the negative what ifs way more than we focus on these positive what ifs. And it's almost as if we're afraid to think about the positive what ifs in fear of jinxing our loved one getting better. But here's the thing, there is no scientific evidence that thinking positive in the what ifs can jinx or cause something bad to happen to your loved one. Yet we find ourselves much more often on the negative what if spiral despite this. So what do we do with all of these feelings of uncertainty?
So before we jump into talking about loss of control and how we use that to help, I just wanted to share something that I had heard about a week or two ago. I know many cancer patients and families have traditionally kind of hated the phrase, the new normal, right? People like to talk about this is the new normal. Well, people don't like that because you don't want this to be the new normal, right? You want the old normal, which is understandable. At the same time, I understand the meaning behind the new normal, right? There's a certain level of acceptance that's needed in order to keep moving forward. Sometimes we can get stuck in wanting to go back to the past. But this past week or so ago, I heard a very wise social worker use the phrase, this is the new now. And I thought that could be so helpful to remember that this is your reality now, but everything in life is temporary. So when the CAR-T process feels so uncertain and the stress level feels so high, just try to remind yourself that this is the new now. And when the new now feels out of control, here's some tips for coping. So first and foremost, focus on what you can control. In any situation in life, there is a list of the things you can control and a list of the things you can't control. Focusing on the list of what you can control is where your power lies. When you focus on what's out of your control, you can feel helpless. But when you focus on what you can control, you feel more powerful. So some of the examples on this slide, outside of my control is the diagnosis, the treatment recommendations, the future, the responses of other people around me. Boy, don't we wish we could control what other people said about this. But we can't. What's inside my control is how I communicate my feelings and needs, learning about treatment options, decisions about my actions today. I wish I could make that word today in that little blue section bold and underlined and 37-point font. Today. People like to use the phrase one day at a time. But honestly, on a really tough day, it might be a couple of hours at a time. What do I have to do between now and dinner time? And that's what I'm going to focus on. And when I get to dinner time, I'm going to figure out what do I need to do between dinner time and bedtime. And that's what I'm going to focus on and nothing else. And also, I also can control how I respond to this diagnosis and treatment for my loved one. Our responses are something that get overlooked, but can be very impactful. So I like to give this example. I was working with someone once who was kind of quick to anger. And he was very quick to tell me, it's just who I am. I have a knee-jerk reaction. I react in anger. I get irritated. And I said, have you ever been, pulled over for speeding or had a headlight out? And he said, yeah. And I said, and were you angry and upset about it? And he's like, yeah. And I said, and when the officer came to your window, did you, yell and berate? And he said, well, no. And I said, how did you talk to the officer? And of course it was, yes, officer, I understand. And so it was a moment to point out, you actually can control your reaction. It just depends on the circumstances, right? So you may think that your frustration or your sadness is out of your control, but we have more control over our reactions than we like to think. I want to look at an example specific to CAR-T. So outside of my control with CAR-T, whether or not the treatment works, how long it takes my loved one to recover, which side effects my loved one will get. But in my control, I can make sure we get to all of our appointments. I can monitor for side effects. I can have the phone numbers of the medical team programmed in my phone. I can put meals in the freezer. I can get rides lined up, right? We can go on and on and on with the things that are actually in your control. I want to take a look at a lesson from the pandemic. So this Venn diagram was posted online on March 29th, 2020. So about 10 days after the world kind of shut down. The purple circle shows things we cannot control, and the yellow circle shows things we can control. Now, not every single example on this diagram applies, but many do, right? I can't control if the disease spreads. I can't control the success statistics of CAR T, but I can control, I love the one in the middle, I can control the things I consume: food, water, media, and news. Right? This is so important. You control how much time you spend consuming these things. I like to say to patients and families, now is not the time to earn your MD at the University of Google. Please don't do it, please. You're going to find a lot of stories out there, some inspiring, some not. But the only thing I can tell you about reading Joe's cancer story is that it's not yours. Right? Other things you can control. You can control self-care, your thoughts and actions, reaching out for support. And at the crossroads between these two places is knowing that I am doing everything I can and being at peace with that. And I want to take a moment to talk about the concept of peace. For some of you, it may have come up when we did our values inventory last week. And I think oftentimes peace has been associated with like this total calm. Everything is calm. That's what peace is. But I want to use a skill that Brittany taught us last week, reframing thoughts, to reframe the concept of peace. I read something once that said, it was a definition of peace, and it said, peace. It does not mean to be in a place where there is no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be in the midst of those things and still be calm in your heart. So I think it's really important to remember that a sense of peace doesn't have to mean that everything is exactly calm and as we want it. So some people, myself included, can be visual people, right? Last week, we talked about making a list of ways to be mindful and things to do for self-care. Because I know for myself, I can know in my head that I have all these skills for coping with stress and uncertainty, but in the moment of high stress, they fall right out of my head. I forget them all and I get lost in my worry. So an actual list of things I can do and things I can say to myself can be so helpful. So this is just a sample list. I can control how I treat others. Number 3 comes up again. I can control what media I consume. I can control when I ask for help. I can control how much time I spend worrying. That's an important one. So a tip that can help people is to actually set aside a time each day that you're going to call your worry time. And it's not going to be long. Maybe it's 15 minutes in the evening after you eat dinner. And that's the time when you sit down and kind of think about the things that you're worried about. And the reason this can be helpful is because if worries pop up throughout the day, you're just going to jot them down and say, I'll get to those later. So instead of having the worry infiltrate your day all day long, you just kind of set aside like a 15-minute period to say, okay, let me think about these things that popped up today, see if I can find solutions to them. So I want you to take just a few seconds now and write down 3 things that you can control and 3 things that you can do for self-care. So I'll give you about 30 seconds to write those down. 3 things you can control and 3 things you can do for self-care. Okay, speaking of self-care, I'm going to pop up a quick poll. I want to see how many people who attended last week's webinar did any self-care in the last week. Any mindfulness, any pleasurable activity, anything. So we're going to pop up a quick poll. I'll give you a few seconds to get your answers in. Don't be shy. I won't know who says yes and who says no. Give it a few more seconds for people to pop in their answers. Anything at all, any mindfulness, any self-care. Okay, so it looks like some people did, and that's good. And you may be asking yourself, you know, why are we talking about the self-care again? There's a mindfulness slide up right now. Didn't we do mindfulness last week? So mindfulness is a tool to push pause, and it's also a tool to help us focus on the present and not get caught up in those what ifs. So the other thing that's really important to talk about when we talk about these what ifs is almost all of our what ifs and most of our anxiety is based in the past and the future, right? We're upset about things that have happened. We're worried about what might happen. But if we can get ourselves to focus on just this moment might just be okay. So last week we discussed sensory mindfulness as a way to kind of help us focus the mind and get away from those racing what ifs. We talked about examples for touch, right? Melting the ice cube in the palm of your hand, in the shower, letting hot water, down on your neck. Last week in our session, we practiced with ocean sounds. And so today, as you may have guessed, based on your assignment, we're going to be practicing with taste. So I want you to take the small piece of food or candy that I asked you to get earlier. Don't eat it yet. Just hold it in your hand. Look at it. Are you excited to eat it? Can you smell it? What does it feel like in your hand? When I say so, you're going to place that small morsel of food in your mouth, but do not chew it or bite it. Simply let it sit in your mouth. Go ahead and put it in your mouth now. What does it feel like? Is it hard or soft? Is it smooth? What does it feel like on your tongue? What does it feel like against the roof of your mouth? Is it changing shape as it sits there? Can you smell it? And finally, what does it taste like? Let the taste stay on your tongue. Is it sweet or sour? Is it pleasurable to taste? Now, for the sake of time, you can finish eating it however you like, but I hope you can see how focusing on the act of truly tasting that item using all of your senses brings the focus of your mind away from other things, right? Imagine if we ate all our food this way. I mean, maybe not all of it because it would take an hour to eat a sandwich, but what if you just ate the first bite of each thing in this way? It can calm your thoughts, it can focus your mind.
Thank you, Lauren. I love that example of mindfulness. So what's next? To summarize, we spent time discussing how living with uncertainty as a loved one is going through CAR-T can be incredibly distressing. We also spent time talking about ways to cope with the unknowns through mindfulness, focus in identifying what's in your control, and reframing thoughts. So what if these tools don't feel like they're helping enough to reduce some of those worries? So one of the most important things that you can do if you're finding yourself extremely overwhelmed, anxious, down, distressed, any of these concerns that we've talked about today, please reach out to a trusted friend or clergy person, a mental health professional. You can talk with your loved one's oncology team. An oncology social worker that's part of your loved one's treatment team could be a great resource and support, or even your own provider. To some of these fears and concerns may even be cleared up through a better understanding of your loved one's cancer and treatment. So I want to also share with you some additional resources that are available through the cancer support community if you feel like you need additional support. So on the screen here, you'll see some of the resources that we provide at the cancer support community. The first one is our cancer support helpline, which is staffed by community navigators and resource specialists who are available to assist you Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time and Saturday and Sunday 9 to 5 Eastern Time. We also have translation services that's available in over 200 languages. And the phone number to our helpline is at the top left of the screen. Additional resource is the My Lifeline platform. It's an online platform with features like a helping calendar, personal blogs, and discussion boards. We have a dedicated CAR-T and immunotherapy discussion board, as well as a dedicated discussion board for caregivers. So I encourage all of you to join My Lifeline as a really great way to get connected to others. So for some additional information offered through the cancer support community on CAR T-cell therapy, please visit our website at cancersupportcommunity.org/CAR-T, where you will find all of these resources. The cancer support community, here we have awesome resources for CAR T-cell therapy for both patients and caregivers, including testimonies from patients and caregivers, videos from healthcare providers, and there's also a free CAR-T guidebook for patients undergoing CAR-T cell therapy. You are more than welcome to call our dedicated CAR-T cancer support helpline, and the number is listed here where you have a CAR-T concierge service. So some additional programs and services that are offered at no cost to you and your loved one through the cancer support community. If you contact our cancer support community helpline, our trained community navigators and resource specialists can conduct a brief intake of your support needs and help to identify resources that might be helpful in supporting you and your loved one going through CAR-T. We also offer an evidence-based screening tool currently for patients called the Cancer Support Source, but we are very excited to be bringing the screening tool to caregivers as well in the near future, so stay tuned for that. We also have a program called Open to Options, which is a research-proven program that can help you and your loved one prepare a list of questions, concerns, and goals that you'd like to share with your loved one's doctor before making a treatment decision. We also have a program called Ask Ruby. It's a virtual program offered through our website. We have created on this program curated resources to connect you to education, support, and action opportunities to enhance your health and well-being from the comfort of your computer. And also we have our Frankly Speaking About Cancer. This is our landmark education series that provides trusted information on a variety of topics that's important to people affected by cancer. So our information is available through print and digital publications, online and in-person programs, and the CAR-T Patient and Caregiver Guide is one of these educational resources. So all of these free programs and additional support services can be found on our website by going to www.cancersupportcommunity.org. One other wonderful resource that we want to share with you today is our affiliates. So the Cancer Support Community offers a variety of professionally led programs designed to assist you and your loved one who have been impacted by cancer. We have over 170 affiliate locations worldwide with programs that include support groups, wellness programs, social connections, educational workshops, and we provide something for every age group and life situation. So children, teens, families, there's programs for anybody affected by cancer. And best of all of these programs are offered at no cost to anyone interested in participating. On our website, there is a Find a Location Near You tab that you can search in your area to see if we have an affiliate, but you can also call our Cancer Support Community Helpline and we'd be happy to assist you with locating a location as well. So I'd like to end our webinar today with a final reflection as an opportunity to take some time for yourself before you go back to your busy days. We're going to be doing a loving kindness guided imagery. This particular guided imagery is from mindworks.org. It is an abbreviated version of this guided imagery just for the interest of time for today. But if you'd like to get comfortable in your chair, or if you'd like to lay down, if that feels more comfortable for you, please do so. And I'd like for you to either close your eyes or focus on a fixed point in the room. And take note of being present in your body and your environment. Take one deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Notice how your body accommodates each breath. And as you're settling in, turn your focus to your heart. Feel or imagine your beating heart with gratitude and warmth. Now I'd like for you to call to mind a person or pet of past or present whose steady love and unconditional acceptance of you touches your heart in a special way. Allow yourself to experience their loving kindness as if they were right near you, happy for your presence and grateful for you just as you are. Notice how this image eases your body and your mind and relax into this warm feeling of connection. Allow any thoughts to arise and evaporate and come back to the heart. Now put this loving kindness and warmth that you are receiving into words. I'd like for you to call to mind that this person or animal wants for you and pictures that they are wishing for you. And repeat these silently to yourself. May I be held in loving kindness. May I be happy and safe. May I be healthy in body and in mind. May I always have enough. May my heart know peace. Next, bring to mind someone who means a lot to you. Someone in whose presence you can relax and be fully appreciated for who you are. Feel the goodness of this heart connection. Feel your mutual gratitude. As you offer your well wishes, imagine that the person is touched by them and experiences happiness and peace. And you can repeat these thoughts to yourself. May you be held in loving kindness. May you be happy and safe. May you be healthy in body and in mind. May you always have enough. May your heart know peace. Appreciate the sincerity of these words and feel their ability to warm and open your heart. And when you're ready, take in one deep breath in and one deep breath out. And take your time coming back to our webinar for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. I don't like to even talk after that. Brittany set such a calm mood and a calm tone. Thank you so much for that. We want to make sure we leave time for questions, so we're going to open up now to our live audience. If you have any questions, please feel free to click the Q&A button and type them in the box that appears. While we're waiting for our first questions to come in, I'll get us started. Brittany, are you able, would it be possible for you to type just those affirmations into the chat box so that people can take them away? May my heart know peace, would you be able to do that?
Sure, absolutely.
I would love to be able to send people home with those affirmations. And then we'll open it up to questions and comments.
Thank you, Lauren and Brittany, for another great session, part 2. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate all of our participants listening. So one question that somebody would like to ask you is, in terms of feeling control and what you can do, how would you both guide how we can get if we're going through this, our children to feel a sense of control? It's a very different realm. And our kids with COVID and just in this day and age pre-COVID feel so out of control, particularly at various different stages of their lives. So could you guide us a little bit about how we can look at that and help our kids?
Sure, I'd be happy to get us started on that. And then Brittany, feel free to jump in. So I think, depending on the age of the children, but I think with children in general, they want to feel involved. So when dealing with something like CAR T cell therapy and, their parent is going to be in the hospital for an extended amount of time, make them feel like part of the process. So for younger children, having them, draw pictures that you can hang in the hospital room. And then, when you do like a FaceTime or a Skype, they'll see the pictures in the back and make it feel like an important job, right? Like, mommy or daddy's hospital room is so boring. We really need your help to make it feel more like home. Just making kids feel involved. They feel like they have something to do. They feel like they contributed. Older kids can go to the store and pick out magazines and, sucking candies to send in with a loved one who's going into the hospital. So really just giving them a sense of ownership can help with that feeling out of control.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that tests can be really beneficial for any age, and they can change as, depending on the age of the child. But it gives a sense of purpose and involvement. And I like how Lauren shared that. I agree.
Thank you. Those are good suggestions. One of our attendees is asking if you think you need to speak with a professional counselor, what's a good way to find one?
That's a great question. So there's a couple of ways to do that. You can certainly check in with your own primary care physician and just say, there's been a lot of stress on me and the family, and I'm looking to find someone I can talk to regularly. You can talk to someone on the CAR T team. So you can talk to someone on your loved one's team to see if they have recommendations. And again, just an honest statement about this has been really stressful on the family and we're looking for more support. And then, of course, there's always kind of the traditional routes of, going through your insurance, they usually have like a find a provider. And there's, certainly some online resources for finding a therapist as well.
And I would just like to add that our cancer support community helpline can be a really helpful resource for that too, if you're having trouble navigating and trying to identify a counselor. Our staffed professionals would be happy to help.
And can you also share with us, because counseling can be so important and integral, but sometimes based on insurance or lack thereof, it's hard to get that covered. So what do we do in that situation?
Yeah. So sometimes cancer centers will offer counseling as part of their program. So it's always important to ask the team if that's a program offering. If not, sometimes we can look to see if there are any financial resources to help offset the cost in other ways. And also looking at what is the copay cost for the insurance, if that was important for someone to go through their insurance plan.
And I'll add to that too, not always, but if you're lucky, could be some community-based programs where you live. So sometimes like a YMCA, a Catholic Charities, a Jewish family and, family services organization will offer either low cost or no cost. Sometimes they have what's called a sliding scale where you pay according to what your income is. So, with a deeper dive, hopefully, you can find the right resource.
Okay, thank you. And one last question that came in terms of control, we're trying to, if we're undergoing treatment, control those things like you suggested that we can. But often, whether it's a caregiver or a loved one or a spouse or a significant other, is trying to limit all the barriers and all of those things for us. And they're exhibiting even more sense of control over our lives. So how do we find a balance to include our caregiver and thank them for what they're doing, but also say that sometimes them controlling is too much?
Yeah, this is a great question. So, and I always say, and I know you probably do, cut your caregiver a lot of slack. So when you see your loved one going through something this challenging, it's incredibly painful. And your caregiver, they want to take it from you, right? They wish they could take it from you. But since they can't, they try to control anything else that they can. They try to control, how much you eat, when you rest, right? Like, and it can feel overwhelming. It is their expression of love. And if it is too much, I really just recommend an open, honest conversation, one that starts with, I know that you're doing this because you love me, and I feel your support, and I appreciate your support. And there are some times when I just need some alone time, or there are some times when I just need to, do this or not do that. Just really have an open line of communication. And then, you can toss it back too to say, is there anything you need from me for you to feel better? Right. So just kind of having each other's backs in that way, but you will have to sometimes have an honest conversation.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Lauren and Brittany. We're going to leave it to you for some closing remarks. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Great. So CSC would like to thank our generous sponsors for this program, Kite, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Novartis. We want to thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your time and participation. Please take a moment to complete our webinar evaluation survey, which will pop up next if you're live with us. If you're listening to a recording of this webinar, you can access the evaluation survey by going to the website listed on this slide. And before I wrap up for the day, please don't forget to join us next week when we discuss the caregiver's role in monitoring for side effects. Thank you so much for your participation and enjoy the rest of your day.